Mr. Pute, tear it down. 14 days. That was how Darla Fitch decided to introduce herself to my family's history. Like 40 years of smoke, sweat, and winter work could be bulldozed by a woman in pressed khakis with legal pad and too much faith in her own authority. I remember standing there with the phone still hot in my hand, looking out at that old smokehouse and thinking, you ever notice how some people move next to a farm and then act shocked that a farm is there? My name's David Pute, and this happened in Caldwell County, North Carolina, where my grandfather, Eldon Pute, bought 22 acres of red clay land back in 1981, when a handshake still counted for something, and neighbors usually handled problems face to face. He built the farmhouse himself, 2 bedrooms, plain and solid. Then over the years he added what the land needed, a hay barn, a root cellar, and in 1984, a squat little smokehouse built out of cinder block and old pine. Nothing fancy, never meant to be, just strong, useful, honest. That smokehouse had a smell all its own. Hickory, pork fat, damn cold air, sweet with smoke hanging low in the yard. If you grew up on land like that, you know the smell I mean. It's not just food. It's memory. It's family. It's the sound of truck tires on gravel before sunrise, the wind moving over pasture, the quiet right before the day starts making noise. I spent my summers out there with Granddad Eldon. He taught me how to patch mortar, how to read a sky, how to tell when weather's turning by the tree line. On cold mornings in November, I used to put my hand on the smokehouse wall and feel heat coming to the block, like the whole thing was breathing slow and steady. Granddad died in 2009. My father, Merritt, kept the place going after that. Vegetables on a few acres, a small beef herd, eggs by the fence. And every November we still did what we call the November pull. Hams, ribs, venison if deer season had been kind, cousins showing up, neighbors hanging around. The whole property smelling like applewood and brown sugar for 2 straight days. For a long time, nobody complained because there wasn't anybody there to complain. Then in 2016, the land east of U.S. got turned into a subdivision called Stonebridge Meadows. Nice houses, neat driveways, little decorative mailboxes shaped like barns, which I always thought was cute in the same way a fake fireplace is cute when you've chopped real wood your whole life. Still, at first it was fine. People waved. Some slowed down to look at the cattle. A few even came by during the November smoke and asked questions because they were curious, not hostile. It was peaceful. Then Darla got elected HOA president. And peace ended like somebody flipped a switch. Darla had moved down from Ohio with her husband, and within about 5 minutes of arriving, she apparently decided Western North Carolina needed her management. She had opinions about everything. Paint colors, mailboxes, roosters, fence lines, grass height, and any sound made before she personally decided morning had started. She dressed like she was headed to a board meeting, even when she was walking a sidewalk. And she treated the HOA bylaws the way certain people treat scripture, quoting what helped her, ignoring what didn't. The first shot she took at us came in a cream-colored note, hand-delivered, calling the smokehouse agricultural and out of place. My father read that line twice at the kitchen table, took a sip of coffee, and said, "Well, it is agricultural. That's what it is." He sent back a short, polite reply saying the structure predated the development by decades and operated legally. That should have ended it. But polite indifference to a person like Darla feels like disrespect. So 6 weeks later, the official HOA notice showed up. It cited Section 7.4 Stonebridge Meadows rules and ordered us to remove the smokehouse or hide behind an 8-foot privacy fence within 14 days. There was just one very small problem with that. Our property was not in Stonebridge Meadows. Never had been. My family never signed their covenants, never joined their HOA, never gave them 1 inch of jurisdiction over our farm. Not your property, not your rules. My father wrote that back in certified mail, with the deed, the parcel map, and enough documentation to make the point clear even to somebody determined not to understand it. Darla came back with a county noise complaint. Then a smoke emissions complaint. Dad got ahead of that one by inviting the county environmental inspector out before the thing even got legs. The inspector came, walked the property, checked the smoker stack, reviewed the regulations, and found no violation. Dad got the report signed, mailed it certified, and started a file. That file turned out to be the smartest thing he did, because Darla didn't stop. She just changed costumes. 1 month, she was an HOA president. Next month, she was a concerned citizen. Then she was a self-appointed zoning expert. Then a health crusader. She showed up at a county commissioner's meeting with petition and a little PowerPoint like she was exposing organized crime instead of complaining about a cinder block smokehouse that had stood there longer than her entire neighborhood. One county commissioner, a cattle farmer named Walt, listened to her for about 4 minutes before asking whether our farm was inside her HOA boundary. She tried to dance around it. He shut it down right there. She left embarrassed, and that was the moment my father said something that stuck with me. He said, "She's not done. People like that don't quit. They just change tactics." He was right. By late 2019, Darla had found a new angle. She started claiming the smokehouse had lost its protected status because it had supposedly been modified after a certain zoning change in the 90s. That was when Dad called me in. I work in construction management, so permits, inspections, old records, that kind of paper trail. That's my world. I drove home one Friday in December and spent the weekend in the basement with him digging through Granddad's old files. You ever have one of those moments where an old cardboard box turns into a weapon? That was us. We found the original 1984 building permit, a 1994 inspection tied to routine maintenance on the stack, and a 1998 county assessor photo showing the smokehouse standing there exactly as it always had. No structural alteration, no broken chain, no legal opening. And then we found the bigger shield, North Carolina's right to farm law. That law, in plain English, says if your agricultural operation was there first, new development around you doesn't get to suddenly call you a nuisance just because they don't like what farms do. That mattered a lot. With help from a real estate attorney Dad knew through church, a sharp woman named Constance Waverly, we sent a formal response citing the law, attaching the permits, the inspection history, the photo, everything. Constance added one quiet little sentence at the bottom, saying further baseless interference could create civil liability. That line hit harder than any yelling ever could. Suddenly Darla's own board started getting nervous. A retired postal worker named Jean called Dad. Then another board member, Patty, who ran a landscaping business. Turns out Darla had been using HOA letterhead and making moves the board had never properly approved. That was our first real crack in the wall. Of course, Darla being Darla, she took that as a challenge. She filed a groundwater complaint with the health department, claiming our smokehouse drainage threatened the subdivision. That one got investigated, too. Also dismissed. Dad framed the dismissal letter and hung it on the smokehouse wall next to the old permit. Then he framed the next dismissal. Then the next. By spring, the smokehouse had what he called a wall of honor. Government paperwork proving Darla wrong in increasingly official ways. You have to laugh sometimes, or people like that will wear your soul out. Then she tried social media. She posted a photo in the neighborhood Facebook group showing smoke from our once-a-year November event and labeled a health hazard. People got stirred up because online outrage is cheap and easy and usually built on half a story. My dad could have argued in the comments, but he didn't. Instead, he joined the group and wrote 3 calm paragraphs about the history of the farm. He posted an old photo of Granddad Eldon standing in front of the smokehouse, work boots, flannel, same steady face my father has. And he invited the neighborhood to come see it in person come November. That changed everything. People started realizing they hadn't been fighting some mystery nuisance. They'd been fed a story about a family farm that had been there long before their sidewalks. And once they saw the human side of it, a lot of them shifted fast. Darla deleted her original post. Couldn't delete my father's reply. Then Constance found the thing that turned this whole mess from a fight into a funeral. She went back through not just our records, but the subdivision's original filings, the developer's declarations, easements, plots, drainage records. Every dry piece of county paper nobody reads unless they're either very bored or very dangerous. Buried in Stonebridge Meadows' own founding documents, in Section 14 of the HOA Declaration, was a clause saying nothing in that HOA could limit or impair any lawful agricultural operation, including associated processing structures, on nearby land that predated the development. In other words, Darla had spent 18 months attacking our smokehouse in direct violation of her own HOA's rulebook. You could not write better comedy than that. Constance called it a golden ticket. We could send it privately and end things fast, or we could wait and use it where Darla couldn't bury it. So we waited. That summer, we got organized. Constance built what she called the brick wall, a binder with every deed, permit, inspection, dismissal, certified mail receipt, timeline, statute, and finally Section 14, highlighted like a confession. I built a roadside evidence wall on a post by our fence, weatherproof, clean, simple, with the key documents displayed where anybody from the subdivision could read them. Right in the center, in the biggest print, sat Section 14. Clyde, our neighbor, looked at it and said it was the most satisfying thing he'd ever seen mounted on a fence post. Darla, meanwhile, kept digging. She tried a regional planning complaint. Lost. Tried getting support for legal funding from her board. Failed. Brought in some fake community standards consultant from back in Ohio. Nobody respected him. Then, in late September, she showed up by the road with a surveyor, trying to challenge our drainage easement. That ended beautifully. Dad spotted her car early, called Constance, and Constance contacted the licensing board. The surveyor got a phone call while he was unloading equipment, asked a couple questions, packed his tripod back into the truck, and drove away without giving Darla so much as a shrug. She stood there on the roadside, legal pad against her chest, staring at our evidence wall like it had personally insulted her. By then, she was cornered, so she got nasty. She circulated an anonymous flyer through the subdivision, claiming our farm was a fire risk, a source of runoff, basically a commercial hazard in boots. Every major claim on that flyer had already been investigated and dismissed by somebody official. Constance moved fast again, sent a defamation warning to the HOA board, and gave them 48 hours to disavow it. They did, 4-1. Darla voted against the disavowal of her own smear campaign, and that dissent got written into the official minutes. 6 days later came the annual HOA meeting. I will never forget that room. Folding chairs, fluorescent lights, too many people packed in, a local reporter with a notebook, a TV camera in the back corner, board members who looked like they hadn't slept well in days. Darla opened the meeting like she was trying to sprint past trouble before trouble noticed. Then Jean, calm as ever, got to item 6, review of the HOA president's compliance with Section 14. The room got so quiet you could hear the hum in the lights. Jean read Section 14 out loud, every word. Then Constance stood up and walked the room through 18 months of nonsense in plain English, one clean paragraph at a time. Then my father stood, held up the binder, and said, without drama, that this was 18 months of his family defending their farm against actions the HOA's own documents had forbidden from the start. He said my grandfather built that smokehouse in 1984, and he was not tearing it down. Then he sat. There was about 4 seconds of silence, and then people started clapping. Real clapping. The kind that comes from relief, from embarrassment, from finally seeing the whole picture. Darla tried one last time to say Section 14 was open to interpretation. Nobody bought it. Not the board. Not the reporter. Not the county official sitting in the second row. Patty moved for a vote of no confidence. Jean seconded. 5 votes. Unanimous. Darla picked up her monogrammed leather cover, walked out of that clubhouse, and the door shut behind her like the end of a sentence that had gone on way too long. After that, things ended the way real fights end, not with fireworks, but with paperwork, apologies, and a quiet return to normal. The HOA formally acknowledged it had no authority over our farm and apologized for the distress. The State Dispute Office later found that Darla had engaged in sustained unauthorized harassment in direct violation of the HOA's own rules. They made Stonebridge Meadows update its bylaws and train future board officers so nobody could pull that stunt again. Constance told us we had a solid case to sue Darla personally. Dad thought about it, really thought about it, then said, "She's gone. The farm is protected. That's the win." And I learned something in all this, something bitter and useful. A lot of people think power comes from being loud, official-looking, organized, aggressive. But real power, the kind that holds up when tested, usually comes from truth, records, patience, and knowing exactly when to let the other person hang themselves with their own paperwork. That November, the Smokehouse ran like it always had. Bigger crowd than ever. Some of the people who came were from Stonebridge Meadows, including a few who had believed Darla at first. The smoke drifted up in long gray ribbons. The air smelled like hickory and sugar and render fat, and that old block building stood there doing exactly what it had done since 1984. Feeding people, outlasting fools, and minding its business. In spring, Dad took the evidence wall down and replaced it with a simple sign that said, "Puke Farm, established 1981. Welcome." That felt right. So here's what I want to ask you. When somebody uses rules to bully people they were never meant to control, is it better to hit back harder or let the truth bury them in public? And have you ever dealt with somebody who mistook authority for ownership? Tell me where you land on that. And if you've lived through anything like it, I'd really like to hear your story.